Conservation works are performed in millions of places around the world, and it seems obvious. However, the conservation of our heritage requires the flow of knowledge and discussion on conservation principles, as well as promotion and support. For the first time in the history of conservation, these problems are taken up on a worldwide scale. This role is fulfilled by the International Council of Monuments and Sites, ICOMOS, an organization celebrating the 40th anniversary of its establishment. The decision to found ICOMOS was made at the Venice Congress in 1964, but the Constitutional Congress took place in Warsaw, the capital of Poland, in June 1965. The Provisional Organization Committee, which worked intensively for a year, was created already in Venice. Its main objective was to organize first national committees, which were to become the basis for the new organization. The Constitutional Congress started at 11:30 a.m. on the 21st of June in the Palace of Culture and Science in the very center of Warsaw. The Rudniew Hall, reserved for the most important celebrations, was the place of the proceedings. The decor of the hall has not changed. It is just like the one used 40 years ago. Conservators from 26 countries sat in the hall. They represented 22 already existing national committees. The discussion started with the issue of the statute and rules of work of the International Council on Monuments and Sites. The main event of the second day of proceedings was the speech given by Piero Gazzoli, the secretary of the Organization Committee. He reminded of the history of ICOMOS establishment and discussed the tasks of the organization coming into existence. Most of all, he emphasized the hazards created by uncontrolled development of the modern world, the need of international cooperation, and the need to develop conservation theory and practice. ICOMOS was to deal with those problems both in individual countries and worldwide. One of the most important goals of ICOMOS was the conservators' task of overcoming political divisions that separated the world after World War II. The first ceremonial reception in the ICOMOS history was held in Warsaw too. Over 130 Congress participants were invited to Wilanów, to the historic interior of one of the most important palaces in Poland. As we find out from participants' reports, the future and hopes for the new organization were constantly discussed in a less formal atmosphere. Professor Gazzoli seemed to imagine he would be very busy in the following years. The talks were accompanied by an exhibition documenting the destruction of Warsaw during World War II. Congress participants had an opportunity to assess in person the results of the post-war restoration during a walk around Warsaw's Old Town. The restoration of Warsaw's Old Town, widely discussed in conservative societies, was supposed to prove that protection of heritage requires a variety of actions which have to depend on local conditions. On the 23rd of June, Congress participants went to Kraków, the historic capital of Poland. This is here in the Wawel Royal Castle where the first General Assembly took place. The proceedings took place on the 24th and the 25th of June in the magnificent Senators' Hall. The agenda included mostly organizational issues. Commissions were called, budget was planned, decision on the foundation of the ICOMOS Documentation and Publication Center was made. It was also proposed to found the first 5 scientific committees: conservation restoration, education, doctrine, law, administration and documentation, the use of monuments and historic sites, historic areas. As you can see, the work of the research committees was to include a wide array of conservation issues. The authorities of ICOMOS were elected. Piero Gazzola was elected the first chairman. Raymond Lamer became the Secretary General. Executive Committee and Advisory Committee were also established, Professor Stanisław Lorenz being the first chairman. A principle of keeping the widest representation of nations and conservation disciplines was accepted during the election. Ever since, that principle was to be applied by ICOMOS. The issue of the ICOMOS Secretariat seat was also decided upon in Krakow. There were a number of suggestions, but the decision was taken upon reception of a telegram from the French Minister of Culture, André Malraux. ICOMOS was offered a building in Paris, financial assistance and the same privileges as those enjoyed by other international organizations. Visiting the most valuable historic sites and monuments of Krakow and presentation of conservation works completed the proceeding. In this way, there was started a tradition of visiting historic sites and monuments as well as presenting conservation solutions during ICOMOS conferences. The first General Assembly finished on the 26th of June. ICOMOS started to work. After 40 years of existence, the ICOMOS sign became a symbol of worldwide conservation activities. The organization's history was made by thousands of various operations, taking place on all continents, including all forms of heritage, of different scale and range. ICOMOS operation is based on the work of national committees. There are 120 of them at the moment. They operate in the majority of countries worldwide and their number is constantly growing. Many of them play an important part. National committees, based in countries having long conservation traditions, associate hundreds of members and conduct a broad organizational, scientific and training activity. But national committees located in countries which do not have much experience in conservation also act as organizers and propagators of heritage protection. National committees organize the majority of ICOMOS activities. At the international level, ICOMOS is first and foremost a grand forum where conservators from all over the world meet. Thousands of conferences, seminars and training sessions on a variety of subjects connected to heritage protection have taken place over the 4 decades. General Assemblies, organized every 3 years, are undoubtedly the events of the greatest scope and importance. During General Assemblies, representatives of national committees establish the directions of organizations' activities and choose its authorities. Assemblies are accompanied by scientific symposiums which deal with current problems. During assemblies, conservation documents are passed that are later recognized by the whole conservation world. The rank of such meetings and at the same time the recognized position of ICOMOS is emphasized by the presence of the most excellent guests, including members of royal families. But the work of ICOMOS does not only have an occasional character. There are as many as 24 scientific committees currently operating within ICOMOS. They have a very wide scope of operation. Starting from traditional conservation problems, through vernacular architecture, polar heritage, or underwater archaeology, all the way to brand new matters such as non-material heritage. In this way, thanks to ICOMOS, specialists from various countries have a possibility to cooperate, learn from each other, and what is equally important, to establish personal contacts. Not without a reason, people speak of the great family of ICOMOS. Since the beginning of its operation, ICOMOS has cooperated with many institutions and organizations connected to heritage protection. An important example of such actions is the substantive assessment of nominations for the UNESCO World Heritage List. Nominations submitted by individual countries are very different. They have to be assessed and compared. This hard work is done by ICOMOS experts during missions. That evaluation is verified during the yearly meetings of specialists from all over the world. Thanks to the professionalism of those assessments, ICOMOS has been the most important partner of the World Heritage Center for years. ICOMOS has no funds for conservation works. Nevertheless, ICOMOS has found a formula that allows to draw attention of the international public opinion to the most endangered objects and sites. The yearly heritage and risk reports present the endangered heritage of individual countries. It is a form of informing and putting pressure on authorities to take care of endangered objects. In many cases, such actions are effective. Today, ICOMOS has almost 8,000 members. Obviously, such a large organization requires a secretariat. Secretariat works in Paris at Rue de la Fédération. Member issues, organization issues, finance and the flow of enormous amount of information, all this has to be dealt with by a team of just a few people. There is also the library and archive in the Paris seat. You can use publications and documentation on site, but more and more materials become available through the internet. At the moment, websites are the most comprehensive source of information on the work of the Secretariat and of the national and scientific committees. However, it does not mean that the significance of publication decreases. Works of ICOMOS were preserved in hundreds of publications. And this is another important element in the output of this organization. Publications, expert reports, training sessions, this is a permanent element and at the same time the output of ICOMOS that is hard to comprehend. The output which is of great use to thousands of conservators worldwide. After all, the work of conservators serves the whole mankind. Heritage in all its aspects is the basis of culture, self-awareness and history. That is why the effects of ICOMOS activities reach much further, beyond the conservators' society. They serve us all. Exactly on the 40th anniversary of the Constitutional Congress, conservators met again in Warsaw on a solemn meeting. Representatives of international organizations and many important people of culture, politics and science came over at the invitation of ICOMOS. They had an opportunity to learn about the accomplishments of this organization. The celebrations take place in the magnificent halls of the royal castle that exists thanks to the work of conservators. And let this fact be a symbolic summary of conservators' work and their most important organization, International Council on Monuments and Sites.